Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 38 of GT Masters, the review series for Gran Turismo's pretty broad selection of GT class race cars, and also some cars which are technically not race cars, but which fall under very similar specs and parameters. And in this particular pick we're featuring what I would say is simply one of the best cars you can get in the GT class category on GT6. Now in the future, of course, we will expect to see newer GT cars from different manufacturers. We've already seen some of those for GT Sport, but to some degree, a few of the models in particular that we already have are very difficult to beat in terms of their all-round ability, and this is one of those cars. Now, to say that this would be, in my opinion, the best GT car in the game would be a very strong statement to make, and I wouldn't necessarily make that statement because there are a number of cars within this series which are very good, but aren't necessarily the best at everything. There are some cars though which are outstandingly good at a lot of things combined together, and that will always make a very good vehicle. This to me is one of those vehicles. If I could only have one GT car on Gran Turismo 6 to use for all GT6 circumstances in terms of pure GT class racing, it may well be this one, because although there are some others which I prefer, such as the Lister Storm, this car is so good at everything it does that it's a very difficult package to beat. For a start, there's the engine. It's a 6.2 litre front mounted rear wheel drive, and it puts out not the highest power of the category, but one of the highest at 989 horsepower. It puts out 720 foot-pounds of torque, and it weighs 1,350 kilos. Now the weight isn't particularly low for this category, there are plenty which are lighter than that, but it doesn't feel that heavy at all. It feels more like a 1,200 or even 1,150 kilo car to drive. The horsepower per tonne is 733, and the PP is extremely high. If I remember correctly, it's actually the highest PP of any front-engine rear-wheel drive car in the game. 692. Combine that with the fact that the price is significantly less than many of its rivals at 435,000 credits, and the value for money on this car is fantastic. That's around 1 million credits or more cheaper than many of the kind of cars which you'd usually take this up against. Now there are some which are the same or cheaper, such as the BMW Z4 GT3, which is also a brilliant GT class car, but even the BMW Z4 would have trouble beating this Mercedes in terms of all-round ability, because although the Z4 is very good, it does have some slight quirks and downsides which would make it difficult for it to beat the SLS. The SLS GT3 is such a good car that it's just a very difficult package to beat, and unlike many other GT cars, it doesn't really have any downsides. The acceleration is incredibly strong, far faster than the road version, and the top speed doesn't let you down. With so many GT class cars in this series, the top speed just doesn't match up to what you need it to be. They generally do around 235, 240, sometimes 250, and very rarely more. There are certainly some. The FXX, the Zonda R, the Z4 GT3 and various others can go faster, but most of them don't. So when you get a car that is not just as good as everything else, but is so much better, such as this one, which can do 265 miles per hour under its own power, and that really does take some beating, not just in a straight line, because the handling on this car is excellent. It's not just good around corners, but it's also easy to drive, which makes it good for pros and beginners alike. And because it's 435 grand, you don't have to be a millionaire on the game to own one. It's the kind of car which I would recommend buying as soon as possible when you're playing on Gran Turismo, because it's one of those cars which you can't necessarily use for every career mode race, but whenever you need a car to use, it will pretty much always win for you. On some occasions, even against LMP cars driven by the computer. Now, driving against real people, of course, that would rarely happen, but in career mode, it's a very dependable car to go for. In terms of overall ability, well, as I said, it's very difficult to beat, so it goes without saying that you should definitely buy this car. I'm not saying that it doesn't necessarily have some small things that could be improved. The weight, for instance, you could always say it would be nice to have it a little bit lower. The handling can be a little bit stiffer than some, a bit heavier than some, which can sometimes hinder your cornering speed compared to something like a Furai or an FXX. But in most situations, those things don't really affect this car that badly. It handles, I would say, kind of like a touring car in terms of how good it is, how grippy it is, and how easy it is to drive fast. But at the same time, it gives you a price and a top speed, which is significantly better not just than a touring car, but than many of its other GT peers. Plus, it's a premium, and it's one of the relatively few race cars which is also paintable. But overall, that's it for this particular episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.